Hello, I'm Pat Farnack, and we're talking to a friend of mine, Perry Garfinkel, today. He's a longtime contributor to the New York Times. He also wrote a book, which I really enjoyed, called Buddha or Bust. And you're involved with spas because you go all over the world. And what are you involved with?
I'm a contributing editor to Insider's Guide to Spas.
That sounds
It's
very,
a tough
very
job,
luxurious.
but I've volunteered, and I love it. I love it.
I bet. What's not to love? Well, in all your globe-trotting, you're exposed to so many health and wellness programs in so many different cultures, and Ayurveda in India is one of them, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Tell me the story, first of all. You were in Mumbai recently.
Yes. Last fall, actually, I was in Mumbai, staying at the Intercontinental Hotel Marine Drive in Mumbai, and there was a restaurant in the hotel called Kebab Corner. And I'm not a great fan of Indian food, but I went there a number of times, enough times to meet the chef. And the chef came out and we chatted, and I told him about this arthritic condition I had. And he said, "Oh, let me discuss that with you further." And he sat down after dinner and he told me he was an Ayurvedic doctor and had Ayurvedic diet that he could prescribe to me. So I said, "Okay, let's do this." He took me aside and we had a long intake, and he asked me a lot of questions about my personality, my lifestyle, my stressors, what I ate, and what the condition I had was. And he went home and he and his wife came up with a daily regimen for me, which involves not just foods I eat and herbs I take, but an entire lifestyle shift, which I adhere to and made a big difference. We'll talk about it.
Yes. Now, I was interested in hearing about the personality types. He asked you about which personality type you are, and what types of personality are there, and what are you?
Well, I fit into the high stressed personality, and I take things seriously. I'm very intellectual. It's all up in my head. This is called Vata, of the three types of personalities. Vata is concentrated. Each of these personality types are called doshas, energy systems, and they revolve around the organs. So Vata is the colon, and it's involved with thinking, contemplation. This is me. This defines me. Second one is called Pitta. That's the small intestine, and it's involved with the digestive system. It's a metaphor. It's how you digest information. So that fit me too. And the last one is called Kapha, which involves the stomach. So again, it's processing, in my case, information, because I'm a journalist.
Right.
So the important thing about Ayurveda, which, by the way, Deepak Chopra, the great Deepak Chopra, an endocrinologist, calls it the oldest and one of the most powerful body-mind medicine system in the history of medicine. So it has a long, thousands of years old. The interesting thing is, because you know I'm a good researcher, I did a lot of Google researching to find out the studies that have been conducted. And while it's a part of what the NIH calls complementary and alternative medicines, there aren't a lot of studies about it that have been published in professional journals. So much of the information and much of the experience is based on anecdote.
Okay.
But as I figure, thousands of years of anecdotes is good enough for me. And now I'm a kind of a test case, and it works. But I was going to say, the important thing is to know that it's very individualized. So whatever we talk about today, again, and this caveat probably applies to most of the guests you have and the things you talk about, talk to a doctor. In the New York area, there are lots of Ayurveda doctors because there are large Indian communities in the tri-state area.
It's interesting how in doing health and well-being all these years, the mind-body connection is more acceptable now in America than it used to be, certainly. And it's plugging into a lot of these century-old programs that have been around.
Exactly. So, Ayurveda, a lot of people think of Ayurveda as a very oily massage, and it is that. But they forget that there's a diet involved and that there's the mind side is either meditation or contemplation. So my daily regimen includes like 20 minutes of meditation. But if you're not a sit down and, cross your legs kind of meditator, he says 20 minutes walk in the sun, if there is sun, in a natural setting will lower your heart rate and serve the same purpose.
Well, let's go over, Perry, what a typical day on this Ayurvedic diet would be like for you.
So the first thing you have to do is stock yourself up with a lot of these esoteric herbs and teas. And there are a lot of Indian shops that are spice shops around the New York area that have those. So armed with some of these, which we'll go into in a minute, the day begins with some sort of exercise, like not a heavy-duty exercise. He said, just do 10 reps of anything you want. So I do a little kind of shoulder roll for myself. And then I also do a little, I do some sit-ups on a thermoball, those big balls. Just a rep to get your adrenaline going. Then it's 5 minutes later, I take this tea called Harsinger tea, which is it's a nightshade kind of night jasmine tea.
Night jasmine.
So I take the tea and then I go out in the garden, or I take my walk, a 20-minute walk, and I also suffer from seasonal affective disorder. Have you talked about this on your show?
Yes, I have, but I think that we need to revisit it.
Let's come back to it, because these are this months that it really affects us. So I go out in the sun and I walk in my neighborhood. And then throughout the day, I take these teas, and at the end of the day, he prescribes, and it's prescribed a warm oil massage to your scalp and the soles of your feet. A big part of this program is to make sure you stay warm. So a lot of you're drinking warm teas, warm lemon tea, not the chamomiles and the spearmints, but these herb-driven teas. And to stay mindful. We talk about mindfulness, but mindful is to be aware of when stress is hitting you and to do something to offset it. So if I'm in the middle of a deadline kind of craze, as I am throughout any day, I walk away from it and I go outside and I do my little reps or my quad stretches, something to break up that stress, and I go back to that stressful situation energized.
That's great. I also saw that he advised putting a little bit of black pepper,
into one of the teas.
Into some of the teas, which I'd never heard before.
Yeah, it's not the best tasting. And none of these teas are really great tasting, but they kind of pump up your heart.
Yeah. So
some of these things are to sedate you a bit, and others are to give you a little more energy.
As far as eating, do you have to stay away from meat? Is it plant-based? What about that?
The only thing he told me to do was keep away from red meat and raw fish. So I love sushi, but I stopped eating that. I'm not a big meat eater, so that was not a big deal. My goal personally was to reduce my protein to the simple proteins like tofu. So I still eat fish, chicken rarely, but the main point was to have a warm meal. So like a cold turkey sandwich for lunch is not highly recommended because it chills you down. Yeah. And the idea is to keep your body warm because that's more conducive to relaxation.
People may not have heard of Fenugreek. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Probably not, but
it's Fenugreek. I don't know.
No, Fenugreek.
Fenugreek.
Let me tell you about Fenugreek. It's I think it's a Mediterranean kind of spice. Mm-hmm. It's good for. This is where I have to refer to my notes if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
It's similar to clover, actually, and it's good for digestion. It slows the absorption of sugars in the stomach and lowers the blood sugar levels. So that's what fenugreek is. It comes in these seeds, and you have to water them and let them bud into sprouts. And you take them the first thing in the morning, and they're very chewy, and the seeds get stuck in your teeth all day. But I have a lot of toothpicks. That's the first thing, and it's a kind of not a great way to start your day. So I quickly follow that with green tea.
Okay.
And then breakfast is a normal breakfast. I just have either eggs or whole wheat toast. He recommends a gluten-free diet. I'm not a big fan of gluten-free diets. I've had a gluten-free bagel once, and I will never have it again.
Well,
I'd rather have sawdust, but I
it's
think
an individual thing.
exactly what I was going to say, Pat. I think you're the whether you go gluten or gluten-free depends on your reaction to gluten. Some people have a low tolerance, and it causes a lot of stomach upset.
Yeah.
He thought I might have a lot of stomach issues. I have butterflies in my stomach, and when I'm before I come on the show with you, but throughout the day, it's not a problem for me. So that's fenugreek.
Now, did you find that it was difficult to adopt this new way of life?
Very
I bet.
difficult. The issue is discipline, and I think that's pandemic. To all of. Can I finish this article I'm writing? But once I was armed with all these herbs, the hard part was going to find them.
Yes.
One of them is called Triphatha churna, which I had a lot of trouble finding, and finally I found it in a packet. Some people have to, have them shipped to them. But interspersing these teas throughout the day, I finally made a little list on my refrigerator door. 10 a.m. tea break, 2 p.m. this break, that. So that was the hard part. And it's not, as I said, they're not great tasting teas. And we in the West are not used to these tastes. So that was the adjustment. The reduction of foods, let me talk a little more about the diets. We've talked about the autoimmune protocol. So, arthritis, now I have called zero-negative rheumatoid arthritis, which is concentrated in my hands. All of these arthritises, the response is the autoimmune diets are to reduce the inflammation. So this diet includes those. So the autoimmune diets really require you to reduce fats. So I don't eat fried foods. Dairy, I've reduced that a lot. Alcohol, which we've discussed. These are all good things to avoid anyway. Red meat, avoid. Caffeine. So one of the hard things to do was switch from my lovely, caffeinated with coffee with a little cream and sugar. It's black, no sweets. So that was an adjustment. And the other dietary restrictions are not so difficult to adhere to.
Do you find it's worked for you? Do you feel better?
I feel much better. I've lost a couple of pounds. I probably
look
lost
slim.
Thank you, dear. You look good too.
Thank you.
And it's helped me modulate my arthritic condition. So when the litmus test is when I went off it, I found inflammation came back. When I stayed on it, although it's a kind of a challenge to your discipline, the benefits are the upside. In fact, I had dinner with friends last night, and she is a nutritionist who lives in New York, and she said she asked me exactly that question: how can you talk about the benefits? And her husband said, well, what's the convincer? What would convince me to go on this program? And I said, well, after last night, after having a martini and a drink and dinner, I will feel worse tomorrow. And that is the reason, that's the upside to this program, that while it may feel great to have a steak and a couple of martinis and, fried French fries, and you're enjoying it that day, the next day, and for me now at this point and stage in my life, it sort of hangs with me for a couple of days. So while each meal may not be as savory as before, I feel better in the days that come ahead.
Fantastic. I'm so glad. Well, thank you for joining us. Did you want to add anything else?
I do. I want to give a little props to the chef. His name is Bhairav Singh, Singh. He's not just a chef. He is an Ayurvedic doctor, and he's a great guy and very very disciplined. It's a one-by-one thing. If you're going to India and happen to be in Mumbai, I recommend the Intercontinental Marine Drive and go to the kebab corner and go ask for Dr. Singh and tell him I sent you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today and educating us about this.
Thanks you very much.
That's Perry Garfinkel, longtime contributor to the New York Times, and my bud.
Thank you.
Thanks.